chiropractic principles and vaccination because it seemed to strike a chord with some people. It's a real obvious example of the chiropractic principles. They both depend upon the same principle that the body is self healing, that the intelligence of the body is far superior than mankind, and the collective, educated knowledge of humanity is incapable of curing or treating these diseases, but that a newborn baby has the intelligence to overcome those pathogens. That's the principle of vaccination, that the innate intelligence of the body is superior to the collective knowledge or the educated mind of all of humanity. And it depends upon that intelligence in order to prevent the body from getting that disease. But really, it's an exposure to the pathogens, an exposure to the disease. It's an example of acquired immunity. Are there concerns with delivery method? Absolutely. It doesn't make a lot of sense if you're going to be exposing the body to fragments of a pathogen or attenuated versions of a pathogen that you would inject that pathogen directly into the bloodstream rather than through natural exposure, even if what you're exposing the body to is man-made or created, or even created by another living thing that also has innate intelligence, but is natural in a sense that it's simply the pathogen, but the pathogen broken down into proteins or fragments of pathogens that allow the body to identify it quickly and overcome it with a mild immune response, and as mild immune response as possible, so that you express a limited amount of health, because it's an expression of health, overcoming the immune process symptoms that are going to be the result of the vaccine are an expression of health in the human body. It's all very similar. They depend upon the same principles. The gurus and the conspiracy theorists grab onto these problems or these inconsistencies, such as delivery method. It would make a lot more sense to, if you have an airborne pathogen, that you'd be exposed to it in an airborne, through the nose, through the mouth, through the airways, in the same way that you'd be exposed to the native pathogen. Or a foodborne illness, that it would be a delivery method that you would ingest and you would eat, and it would go through the digestive system. That would be a better delivery method than injecting a newborn baby with a dirty needle, essentially. Uh, so there is a kernel of truth there, where the chiropractor is going to differ from the medical professional. But that kernel of truth explodes into something that's dangerous and dramatic and is harmful to the profession. The patient rights issue is also an important issue. Anything that's mandatory on a political or legal sense, a chiropractor is likely to disagree with. So the guru now is speaking to that innate thought, and they're manipulating these thoughts where, of course, you would disagree with mandatory anything, especially in terms of healthcare. Mandatory, there are faiths and there are religions and there are patient rights issues associated with making healthcare or any aspect of healthcare mandatory that people will naturally disagree with. But they take that natural disagreement and they feed upon it and they build upon it. And unfortunately, they're doing it in order to benefit themselves and increase their own individual wealth. And they're not doing anything for the profession. They're not doing anything for you as a chiropractor. They're actually harming you, and they're causing harm on the profession. Because it's hard to take a group of people seriously when 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 of them get together to celebrate an individual that claims pediatricians are killing babies or that vaccines cause autism. These are outlandish nonsense claims that, if you take any time to research, are complete nonsense. Autism, one, we got the reclassification of autism. This is a true thing. This is a thing that is applied to all mental health disorders. They applied a spectrum, just like chiropractic is a spectrum that goes over a large group of people that go all the way from the extreme mixers and all the way to the extreme straights, but everybody in the middle. It's a bell shaped curve, and everybody in the middle represents the majority, but there is a spectrum on both sides, and they applied that thinking and that logic to mental health disorders, including autism. But autism, and autistic people predate vaccination. They just weren't called autistic, they were called mutes. And this was something that was so prevalent in society throughout history that they are often characters and they are represented in plays and they play important roles and things. So they were, there's just the hunchback, that hunchback of Notre Dame, and the role that that's played in the uh, I'm not thinking of the term right now, but the whatever it is that represents culture and the way we express ourselves in art and in literature. The mute was a character and played a role in that all throughout history, medieval times, well before vaccination. So there, and what would that be described as? Someone that was fairly normal but didn't verbally communicate, had the ability to hear. That, that character that you think of when you think of the mute, from years. That's not necessarily something now. I think it may have become more um, apolitical. It's not a politically correct thing to do to refer to someone as a mute. I don't know. I don't even know if that's a thing, but that character did exist in the past, and it plays a role in many different things. And that represents an autistic person that predates vaccinations. So there's really no link between autism and vaccinations. And if you look at autism and start reading about autism, I mean, could it be feasible that there is some sort of link? Only because of the time that the vaccines are administered, and the time at which you would expect people to start communicating verbally, and the time at which these disorders become apparent. And also, if you research the disease, that they've learned a lot about autism. It has to do with the growth of the brain and the types of cells that are present in the brain. Autistic brains tend to be larger, and the connections that these neurons are making and the cells that persist and the types of cells that they are, and glia tissue versus neurons and synapses. It's all really remarkable what they're learning about autism, but they're definitely learning that there is no link between thimerosal and autism, or appears to be any link at all between vaccines and autism. But vaccines in general are going to fall outside the scope of practice of the doctor of chiropractic. But the philosophy of chiropractic and the principle of chiropractic is that we share with vaccinations, which vaccines are globally accepted. They're used across the globe in every government and every industrialized area, that the body is superior in intelligence, and that intelligence is innate and it's inborn within, just as chiropractic. But it requires time in order to work, and it's limited by matter. If you have a disease such as smallpox, the way we eradicated smallpox wasn't through modern medicine, it was through innate. Innate eradicated smallpox in the United States because we no longer need to be inoculated or vaccinated for smallpox. We couldn't figure out how to overcome smallpox. Innate figured out how to overcome smallpox. But even when you were exposed to smallpox, 30% or 40% of the population would die. Some of the other population wouldn't die. So again, we're left with that same question. Why did this portion of the population succumb to the disease and die? The same question that D.D. Palmer asked. And this other portion of the population did not. Their innate, its matter and its intelligence and the time it had, in the time it had in order to overcome this pathogen, all chiropractic principles, because they were greater ability to express itself, overcame the disease. Well, now we know how to overcome the disease. Man doesn't know how to overcome the disease. Our educated mind doesn't, but that individual's innate intelligence does. And we can share innate, and we can learn from innate. The principle of vaccination depends upon that innate intelligence. Not only that it is inborn, but it has the ability to learn, because now if you're exposed again in the future, you're no longer susceptible to that pathogen, or it's much less likely that you'll be susceptible to that pathogen. And it also appears that innate can forget. If you get a vaccine at a certain point in time for a certain type of pathogen, you may be immune or inoculated against that pathogen for a number of years. But that if you don't exercise that muscle, if you don't use those pathways, then there is no use for innate to continue to record these instructions, apparently, and it disappears because now you can become ill or suffer the ill effects from certain pathogens that you had previously been inoculated against. So we can learn about innate, and it's already an accepted principle. If why did that population die and the other population did not? We're still left with that same question. Nobody knows. Nobody knows a lot about medicine and a lot like anesthesia. You can ask the greatest anesthesiologist in the world, how does your anesthesia work? And they don't know. We don't know how chiropractic works, but they still use anesthesia for every surgery. You can still use chiropractic, even though you may not necessarily be able to explain in fine detail, scientific method, how the chiropractic adjustment is going to improve the innate expression of the body. But in principle, we know that the innate intelligence of the body is more superior to anything that medicine has to offer, and we rely on that innate intelligence when we vaccinate our populations. If anything, it's the most reliable form of medicine that we've ever devised is to help the innate intelligence of the body, which is what chiropractic does. We aid the innate intelligence of the body to let greater express itself. The portion of the population that did not succumb to the disease. What was the difference between them and those that did succumb to the disease? Their matter in time couldn't work fast enough, couldn't figure it out. It was preoccupied, it was distracted, it was subluxated, and subluxation or form of stress could have been anything. We have to reclaim our language because what is a subluxation? It's a response to stress. Stress can be chemical, physical, and emotional. So there's other stresses, there's other things that could have influenced that portion of the population that did succumb to the disease that inhibited their innate processes. But structure related to function. Matter is the limitation. We're focused on improving the physical matter, the physical structure of the body to greater express its innate intelligence so that it doesn't not succumb to disease when it is encountered with it. But there are limitations to those matter because a portion of the population, some of these diseases, even if you're able to overcome them, such as measles, the process that would and the expression of the symptoms that your body goes through and your innate goes through in order to do that, again, it's a limitation of matter and time. The expression of health in those situations include a fever. And in a young child, a high fever can have long-term detrimental consequences. It's not necessarily that the measles is the issue, it's the fever that's the issue. And trying to control that fever. Now, in a normal scenario, with a great many of pathogens, the fever is a good thing because it doesn't exceed a level that causes damage, but it's high enough in order to kill off the pathogen or to give your innate more time to figure out the antibodies or to keep it at bay long enough for your innate to figure out the antibodies or the chemical structure it needs in order to overcome the pathogen. In its matter, because it has cells that have to go through these things, there's processes that have to occur, processes require time. All these things are going on in your body that are completely in line with the chiropractic principles, leading to the body overcoming disease, not medicine. Medicine does not adhere to the chiropractic principles. Medicine is not a good example of, the use of antibiotics, the use of those are not great examples of the chiropractic principles, but vaccines are outside of medicine. They are not something that man has created from the outside and put into the body in order to cure some disease. Man has taken the disease and given it to the body and allowed the body to overcome it. These are the principles of chiropractic. These are the principles that have been globally accepted, that are applied in many governments all over the world. How many of you would like to see as many children under chiropractic care as are vaccinated or inoculated against disease across the world? Well, in principle, the world has already agreed that that's exactly what they need to do, is to make sure that every child is adjusted and that every person is adjusted so that their innate can express itself greater. That's the principle of chiropractic. to do things that medicine can't do. That's the history of chiropractic. We're founded on doing things that medical doctors couldn't do. The only reason there is a chiropractic profession is because of the benefits that patients received that medicine could not do. My office is built on helping people with conditions and symptoms and things that I didn't treat. I only treated subluxation, and the body healed itself. It just works. The body does it. Same with vaccines. The vaccine is an exposure to the illness. They're simply trying to attenuate or limit the virility of the pathogen, so that that your innate will require less time in order to overcome it, and that your matter will be better at processing the pathogen and its parts and its pieces. The delivery method is obviously a real concern. If you need to add all kinds of terrible things to it in order to stabilize it, in order for your innate to be able to overcome it, and it's a risk benefit analysis. How much do you attenuate this virus? What process do you go through to get these ingredients? What is the delivery method? If it is simply a pathogen that gets chopped up into fragments and those proteins are now exposed to the body, and if that's as easy as it is, as simple as it is, that's within line of the chiropractic principles, because natural exposure and your body overcoming disease is the chiropractic principle. Your innate is superior. But these are how these gurus go about dividing the profession and alienating the profession and isolating the profession. There's real harm to this. Billy DeMoss gets up and on stage and makes his claims, and people celebrate him, but then other people point to him and they say, this is what chiropractors believe, and it's not. We don't get educated on vaccines. This is not part of our scope of practice. If you are educating patients about that, you are the one that's practicing medicine, because everyone wants to jump and say, well, go get your medical degree, go join the medical profession if you're not going to be anti-vaccine. I'm not being anti-vaccine. I'm also not being pro-vaccine. But the person that's actually trying to practice medicine is the one that's making any proclamation about vaccines at all. You should go to your prescribing doctor. That's what you should do. I always empower patients with as much information as I can, but I encourage them to communicate with the prescribing doctor, to learn as much as they can, but I also empower them with the knowledge that since they are asking questions, since they are doing the research, since they are informing themselves, they're going to make the right decision, and they're going to be a good parent because they're involved and they're taking part in the conversation. So no matter what the decision is, it will be the right decision for them and for their child, because they're participating in the conversation, that they are a good parent. That's what good parents do. Just the fact you're asking me this question tells me that you are absolutely going to be a great parent. But unfortunately, you need to ask your prescribing doctors these questions. And you need to, there's plenty of information that's available out there. That's about the limit of a doctor of chiropractic, is to refer to the proper provider. That's the practice of chiropractic. Getting involved in things that you have no education in is not the practice of chiropractic. That's the practice of medicine. That's the guru is actually practicing medicine by having any opinion about vaccinations. So it's just they feed on these truths, these small kernels of truth, and exploit them and do so to divide the profession. The correlation between autism and vaccination and this argument drives me crazy, because it's very similar to the stroke and chiropractic argument. The only reason why there's any correlation of any kind between chiropractic and stroke is because neck pain is associated with chiropractic and stroke. But this discussion is so ridiculous to have. Look at it with some common sense. If the forces involved with the chiropractic adjustment were capable of causing a stroke, then extreme forces that well exceed beyond the chiropractic adjustment must also lead to stroke. But we don't see people having strokes on athletic fields where they're going to experience tremendously more forces than a chiropractic adjustment. There's no protocol in place to deal with the twisting of a neck on an athletic field to evaluate the patient for a stroke. Same thing with automobile accidents, motorsports. The head can take and whip around and take these tremendous forces where the brain is much more likely to be injured than the neck itself. It's the way it's designed. It's impossible. All chiropractors have dissected people. We have looked in individuals' necks. We know that the structures, how deep those tissues are, the layers of fat and connective tissue, and the membranes and the fascia and the muscles, and then and these arteries are inside bones. They're surrounded by. It's not feasible. It's not logical. It's not common sense. The only correlation is time. That there is a time in which there is a person experiences symptoms, neck pain or headaches, so they go to the chiropractor. That's the only correlation. But that's what the gurus on the other side, they hold on to that small kernel of truth and they explode it and exaggerate it, doing the same thing the chiropractic guru does with vaccines. And next thing you know, chiropractors are killing people and causing strokes. They're both ridiculous propositions. But we're looking at a revolution in the healthcare system where we're going to have to integrate, not necessarily integrate with the healthcare system, but we're going to have to participate in the healthcare revolution. There is a healthcare revolution that is going on, and the writing is on the wall. Healthcare costs have continued to explode. We've talked about how the insurance companies are all investing in healthcare delivery. We've seen the big five get involved in the CVS Minute Clinics. We've seen Humana get involved with the Kindred Healthcare, Kindred Healthcare, which is home care delivery. We've seen United purchase more than 1,000 clinics, outpatient clinics across the United States, urgent care clinics. And we're seeing Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, Jamie Dimon, they're investing in delivering healthcare services to their employees, and they're investing in those systems of employee-based healthcare. There is a healthcare revolution going on. It's occurring, and we need to participate in it. We don't need to participate in the conspiracy theory nonsense. We need to participate in what's going on right now, what's real. And all this guru bullshit is simply distractions from reality. The ACA and their X-ray guidelines and that's all bullshit. It has nothing to do with reality. I hope that by using adult language, I didn't somehow destroy this video. But I did want to give a shout out. If anybody wants to look at this schism of chiropractic through the eyes of a first-year chiropractic student, it was written by J. Keith Simpson, Bob Stoyanovich. It was published not too long ago. It was really an excellent story that was published. They did a wonderful job talking about the divisions in chiropractic and the history of chiropractic and why some of these divisions continue to persist or why they're ill-perceived. And they provide some nice explanation for it. Unfortunately, I really don't like their conclusion because it seems to be the ACA kind of conclusion where you simply abandon the principle of chiropractic, you bash principled chiropractic, and you move on with this ACA model, which seems to abandon the subluxation-based care. You can't simply ignore, divide, or separate or bash one side of the profession in order to advance the other side of the profession. You need to organize the profession. Everybody needs to move forward together. That's why you have to leave these gurus behind and their nonsense behind. Leave it in the trash. Let's move on. Let's participate in this revolution. A lot of the language that they use in some of these hit articles, such as the LA Times piece or the Science Babe piece where chiropractors are bullshit is the title of her article. But that's really complete nonsense. They all point to some of these same things. And I believe that's why Bob Stoyanovich and J. Keith Simpson wrote this paper, because they really did a wonderful job of responding to this propaganda that was in the public months before they had published their paper, including looking at the language that Didi used, why Didi used certain language, and how this language led to these divisions in the profession, how we wound up splitting apart. And it is important. It deals with the principle. But the guru is so delusional and is so far gone that they're causing real harm. And it leads to that anti-chiropractic propaganda that these people did a fairly nice job responding to with facts. So if you want to educate yourself on how to respond to the anti-chiropractic propaganda, look at those articles uh, that were published. The Schism in Chiropractic Through the Eyes of a First Year Chiropractic Student. Uh, and, some of the negative articles that chiropractors are bullshit. They point. One of the first things they do is they point to Billy DeMoss and they point to his anti-vaccine position, and they say and they point out that if we're going to celebrate him, then we are equally as lunatic or we're equally as full of it as Billy DeMoss. If you're going to celebrate this person, and this is what this person represents, well, now all of us get associated with that nonsense. And then it's endorsed by a university. So they say, well, your universities aren't real. Your science isn't real. If you're endorsing this kind of rhetoric that is anti-pediatrician, anti-vaccine, then you can't possibly be dealing with reality. Therefore, your entire profession is nonsense. Unfortunately, I've had these conversations. That's what happens when you respond to the author on Twitter and you get into a Twitter battle with all kinds of the followers of these peddlers of hate, these Alex Jones-esque people. This is what they actually believe. This is what they're spreading. This is what the army of people out there are spreading about chiropractic because of people like Billy DeMoss. You don't have to look hard to find the people that are anti-chiropractic. There's plenty of it out there. And this is what they point to. They point to Billy DeMoss and his nonsense. It causes real harm to the profession. That's how you wind up with 30% of the American population claiming they don't trust doctors of chiropractic when a far lesser percentage of people actually go to doctors of chiropractic. How did that many people claim that they don't trust doctors of chiropractic? Because of guru nonsense and nonsense like this. They didn't have to go to a chiropractor. They had to read this story that was downloaded 1 million times or listen to the podcast that was downloaded 10 million times and listen to the anti-chiropractic propaganda. They never went to the chiropractor, but they don't like chiropractors, and they'll always tell people don't go to the chiropractor. When they're going to go to the medical doctor and they're going to take opioids and we're going to have an opioid epidemic, or they're going to take antibiotics for diseases they don't need and overtake those antibiotics, and they're going to wind up with superbugs, right? We depend upon the innate intelligence of the body. Vaccines depend upon the innate intelligence of the body, not medicine. Well, how does it work? How does anesthetic work? How does aspirin work? Nobody knows how this stuff works. Well, thanks a lot for listening. I got to get that off my chest. I've been trying to edit. All I keep doing is creating content, and I'm not doing a very good job of editing content and posting content. So thank you very much. Appreciate everybody, anyone that took the time to listen to my rant on vaccines and the chiropractic principle. I really would like as many people to embrace chiropractic as embrace vaccines. And in principle, they are exactly the same. We depend upon our innate intelligence to be superior to anything that all of mankind has been able to accomplish in the history of the civilized world. We can't deal with smallpox. We can't deal with polio. Polio is smarter than man because polio has an innate and measles has an innate. And when we get to the battle of the innates, we can educate our innate. We figured out a way to give our innate just a little bit of information, the cheat sheet on what this pathogen looks like, what its parts and pieces are, what kind of weaponry it has. You're still going to have to fight the battle, innate, but we're going to give you a little bit of information to help you fight that battle and help you win that battle. Give you the little bit more time that you need for your matter to express your intelligence to overcome this pathogen. We're going to give you that little adjustment that you need in your matter. We're going to give you that little edge that you need to overcome. That's what the chiropractic adjustment is. We're just going to give you that little improvement. We're just going to make that small adjustment that's going to align the structure of your body so that your matter in time can express itself that much better. Sometimes it could be dramatically better. Sometimes it's a little bit better. But the principle of chiropractic, the principle of the chiropractic adjustment is to revivify the body, to improve the expression of innate intelligence. That's the principle of vaccination. It's the best example of the chiropractic principle because it's the most widely accepted and applied principle of chiropractic all across the world. So thank you very much. I love and appreciate all of you. I don't even know what I'm doing.